Hey, this is Sean Anderson with Seanderson Tech. Welcome back to my channel. Let's get started. So the last couple of videos we've talked about what is the Ansible inventory file, how to install Ansible, and a couple other topics around Ansible. But today we're going to be talking about how to actually run Ansible, and there's a couple of different ways that you can run it. The first way is ad hoc, and that's what we're going to be doing in this video today. The second would be to run a playbook. Now, the difference between ad hoc and running a playbook is going to have a number of tasks, a number of commands that you're going to be running, versus ad hoc is running one single command, and it's running it right from the command line. So it's a great way to test if something is working, if your Ansible is set up correctly, if your hosts are connected, or just troubleshooting Ansible in general. And generally what I would do is I would run Ansible ad hoc commands before running them in a playbook, just to make sure that they're working correctly in the command line, and then putting those into a playbook afterwards to automate out those manual ad hoc processes. Now I'm going to walk you through 3 examples of how you can use Ansible ad hoc automation to troubleshoot and make sure that your systems are working correctly. The first one is going to be the ping command. And the ping command works differently than you would think with ICMP ping, where it reaches out and sends a packet and sends a response back to you. The way that Ansible does it, and the way that the Ansible ping module is going to work, is you're going to connect in via SSH through Ansible. Ansible verifies that the SSH connection happened, and then returns the control back to the host. Now, the second example is going to be running the setup command, which is going to be an important way to grab Ansible facts or specific variables to the machine for later use. Now, the third example is I'm going to show you how to run a shell or a bash or a terminal command line command through Ansible against a number of machines. And the way that you do this is through the command module. And you can run each of these different modules that I've mentioned, the ping, setup, or command modules, in a playbook as well. But in this case, we're going to be running them ad hoc, and it'll make sense why we're doing that as we move forward. So the first thing that we're going to start out with is the ping module. And the ping module is going to SSH into the machine and is going to verify that it connected properly, and it's going to disconnect after it's done. And so essentially it's similar to the regular ping, but instead of using the ICMP protocol, it's going to use SSH to connect into the machine and verify the connection through SSH instead of through ICMP. And so the way that that's going to work is we're going to run the Ansible to run your ad hoc automation, and so the Ansible command with all, which is going to touch 4 different hosts, and we're going to use -m to specify the module, and the module is going to be ping. And so this is our first ad hoc command. And so the way that's going to work is it's going to connect into the machine, and you can see that it was a success. It was able to connect. It did a couple of things on each of those different machines and ran the ping command and returned with a pong. And so each of these, it goes in and does the same thing. SSH is in and returns the pong. SSH is in, returns the pong. SSH is in, returns the pong, and so on and so forth for every machine that you touch. And so for troubleshooting purposes, this is great because you can easily connect into a number of different machines and verify connection with Ansible and verify that everything is set up correctly. And so this is the first thing that I would do if an Ansible playbook ever fails, is to run the ping command. Now, the second module that we're going to be touching is called the setup module. And what the setup module is going to do is it's going to connect into a machine, pull machine-specific information or Ansible facts, and returns the output. And so when I run this command, it's going to be a little bit full And so we're actually going to just go through a couple of those different output items and show that it's returning those variables like it should. And so the way that this is going to work is we're going to use the Ansible command again. Ansible we're just going to run it on the local host. So localhost -m setup. And the nice thing about localhost is it actually recognizes that we're only going to be targeting that local host. And so that's a pre-built host name that you can use for Ansible. And so we're going to run that. When we run this, you're going to see that it returns quite a bit of information. And we're just going to take a look at a couple of these. And so this one in particular right here is my wireless card. And you can see that it's not actually active. And so when you go in here, you can see that there are specific pieces of information that are relevant. And so if you wanted to say, hey, I want to ensure that a wireless card is enabled, you can say, oh, let's check to see if that wireless card is enabled. And if it's not, then we're going to go ahead and change that. And so this is one way to check that information, or check MAC addresses or IP addresses, host names, and there's a bunch of other information in here, and we'll cover more of this when we go into variables in a later video. Now the third module that we're going to be using is the command module, and the command module, what it does is it connects into a machine via SSH, runs a shell or bash or terminal or PowerShell command, or a script that you might have, and runs that script locally on that machine. And so the way that this would work, we're going to go ahead and do Ansible all-m, and we're going to say cat the etc hosts. So we're going to use command, and we have to use this a argument right here. And basically that all that states is we have a couple of arguments that we're going to be using with our Ansible command module. And so the argument here is going to be, and you have to put it in quotes, but our argument is going to be cat etc hosts. And what you can see that does is it actually goes in and runs that command on each of those machines, and you can see it cats the etc host file for each of the machines that I'm connecting to, and each one has its specific IP addresses, or if I had anything inside of it as well. That's a great way to pull that information. Now you do have to be careful when running the command module, because it removes that idempotent status of your modules. And so where if you run a module that copies information into a file, generally what Ansible is going to do is it's going to say, hey, check to see if this information is there. If it's not, then make sure it's in there. Whereas the command module, it's going to run every single time, and it doesn't care if something is there or not. It's going to run it. And so you have to be really careful. If there's something that you don't want running multiple times, the command module will run it every time if the command module is run. Now the last piece of information that I did want to pass along is there's a couple of different arguments that you can pass through this as well. So if you wanted to run as an administrator, you'll have to pass the become user or ask password parameters inside of the Ansible command. And so to do that, you would do Ansible, we'll do all-m ping, and to run as administrator, you would do -b. And basically what that's going to do is it's going to run as sudo instead of the regular user. And so if we were to do this, it's actually going to fail on a couple of my machines because it's missing that sudo password. But you can see that with at least one of my machines, that sudo password is the same, and so it did work. So that's one way that you can ensure that something will run on your machines, especially if you have an underprivileged account. You can always set up a service account that will be able to run updates or push configuration changes to those files that require that administrator access. Now, to check the other parameters that are available, and this will be, we'll cover a lot of these different topics in a future Ansible video, but a lot of these different parameters can be found in Ansible Help. And basically what this is going to give you is a documentation page with a bunch of different parameters that you can run. And I'm not going to cover each of these, but it'll show you how to use specific private keys, or if you wanted to set a connection as a different type of connection, such as WinRM, or run as a different user. So if I wanted to run as a some other user that's on my accounts or on my machines, then I can specify that. But each of these specific parameters are detailed in this documentation. It's pretty straightforward. The other place that you can find it is on the Ansible webpage, and I'll drop a link here if you wanted to click on that, and you'll be able to find that documentation in a web browser as well, and read through all the things that you can do with the Ansible command. So that's about it for Ansible ad hoc automation. We're going to be covering more advanced topics around this later, such as Ansible playbooks, or how to do more complex tasks with ad hoc automation, or diving into the variable file. And so to make sure that you see these videos when they drop, please hit like and subscribe, and I'll catch you on the next one.